Welcome, everyone. We're so happy and excited to see so many of you here. And we are very proud today to be able to launch the third edition of our All World Alliance Insights Report 2025. We know that we have a lot of participants here who have also been instrumental in making the report happen. So thank you already now to each and every one of you. The agenda for the webinar today is that we will kindly get an overview of the insights from Jennifer Barrow from Diversity Study Group. After which we have a panel discussion to explore how we can keep or stay committed and keep leading from the front and use the insights from the report to continue driving meaningful change with the Alliance. And I'm very pleased to be joined for this panel by Heidi Heseltine, Meei, Wong, and Mikael Skov. We'll give them a more proper introduction when we get to the panel. But welcome to everyone, and let's slowly get started on the program. And before doing so, let me say a little bit about the All Aboard Alliance. I know that a few of you may not be too familiar with the All Aboard Alliance, so just sort of a brief explainer. The Alliance was formed in 2022 based on a perceived need amongst industry leaders that we really needed a collaborative effort to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across the maritime industry. And since then, we've been growing as an alliance, and our key priorities is that we work together to drive collective action. So we are very committed to make sure that not just current, but also future generations, both at sea and on shore, are treated with dignity and respect. And we work together to see what we can do collectively to attract diversity of talent and strengthen our ability to go through the transformation that is already happening, but that is only likely to speed up in coming years, focused on decarbonization, digitalization, and automation. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of member companies involved. I'm not giving you all their names, you can see them here. But we have been very pleased to see over the first 3 years an enormous engagement, especially in our work streams. For those of you not aware, we have 2 work streams that were launched in 2022, one focused on diversity at sea, and the other one focused on diversifying maritime leadership. And both of them engage multiple companies and leaders from all of these companies in driving the change that we want to see. And just a little bit about our approach. When we do aim to drive transformational change across the industry, we do that by working together to identify problems that are not currently being addressed. We then collect enough data for us to know what kind of action to take. And we then co-design solutions within the Alliance, but also engaging with people from outside the Alliance to really co-design solutions that can adequately address the problems identified. And we then pilot those solutions real time, all with the ambition of really developing better standards for how people across the industry are being treated. And we've been doing that, especially within the Diversity at Sea pilot, where we came up with the sustainable crewing guidelines. But a lot of the work that we are doing is very much centered around sharing knowledge, sharing learnings, and driving action together. So with this report, what we are aiming to do is that we want to make sure that the Alliance and the companies involved, that we work together in a meaningful way. So this report is also about the Alliance having, we call it teeth, in the sense that we want to see continuous action from member companies. If there is no progress on DEI, we will insist that there will be. So over time, that is also what you'll hear now from Jenny. We have really seen progress across the alliance. And that's what it's all about, really driving progress and mutual accountabilities amongst us within the alliance, but also showcasing best practices, what works well, and really fast track the things that are more impactful. So really learning quickly from each other as to how we really can drive change on and sort of make the industry more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive. So with the report, we have a call to action coming from this year's findings. Jenny will dig a bit deeper into that. I just want to highlight three things. What we're seeing is that there is a clear ambition to promote a strategic and continue to promote a strategic approach that links diversity, equity, and inclusion to business goals, so that we're making it not something that is nice to do when you don't have anything else to do, but something that has to be done. We're also seeing that leaders increasingly are emphasizing the importance of inclusion. It's more important than ever to keep insisting on creating the space and this for speaking up, a sense of belonging and psychological safety across member companies. And finally, even if there is political headwinds, we've all seen and heard that, we are incredibly impressed to see that the commitment remains steady. We're seeing that those investing in DEI experience that it improves their ability to not just attract, but also retain and develop the skills that they need to drive sustainable business outcomes. So we hope that what you will see in the report, we'll share a link to the report released today, later in the session. But for now, I'll hand over to Jenny so we can learn more about what has been coming out of the insights from this year's report. Over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Susanne. And lovely to be here, because this is the third year that we have gone through everybody's submission and pulled out insights. And just to echo Susanne, it is just terrific to see how some of our member companies, in fact, most of them, are really making tangible progress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and talk about some of the key themes that we're seeing from each of the principles. And the way I'm going to do that is that I'm going to be talking about our maturity framework. For those who aren't familiar with this, last year we pulled together a framework that showed, well, what does good look like for each of the principles? And even more importantly, how do you move from where you are right now? How do you progress? What do those steps look like? So that's what I'm going to be using as I talk through each of our principles. So let us start with our first principle, which is accountability. And this is where it's, who actually owns this? How is it linking to your strategy? And how are you measuring progress? And it is lovely to kick off with a really positive story. Member companies are really strong against this principle. And as we can see here, the blue circles are where we were last year. And this year, it's how the dark blue are the number of companies that are performing against starting out, developing, advancing, and leading. And we're seeing more organizations showing advancing and leading characteristics against this. I guess some of the trends here, what we're seeing with the business sponsors, they're remaining at the top level, which is absolutely crucial. And they are providing some opportunity for other leaders to include DEI in their remits, whether that's seafaring or on shore. So there's becoming a more team approach to ownership of this agenda, although it still rests with that C-suite. The other thing we're seeing is that there are more links to strategy, which is absolutely terrific. It was a call to action from last year, and we are seeing more organizations being really a lot more confident in why this work is crucial to their organization. And what is also really good to see is that organizations have set out what their ambition is, whether they call that a target, a key performance indicator, or this is how we want to look. There are really great examples of where organizations are seeing the progress that they have set out to make. In the submission at the end, and it's one of my favorite parts, we say, what are you most proud of? And a real trend from that is people are proud of really seeing a difference to their leadership team, for example, or what's happening on board their vessels. So we know that that measurement and progress is happening. The other thing that we've done this year is that we've encouraged people to say, right, okay, use this to really impact what you're doing. And so after each principle, we say, well, what could you do now? What could you do next? And what could you do later? And with accountability, what we would be suggesting is right now, there is, as Susanne said, there is some strong headwinds in some quarters. And so more than ever, we need to be sure that we are linking our work to what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And then the next thing that needs to happen is that people need to understand, leaders especially, how to cascade that through to their teams. And then later, benchmarking is a really good way of seeing, well, what else is happening? How can we have a wider conversation with all of our stakeholders? So let's move to principle 2. And this is our learning and development principle. This is how we equip and educate people to understand their role in bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion to life. Steady progress here. It's not as strong as principle 1, but it's still very steady. What is good to see, especially in year 1, we did tend to see an over-reliance on just e-learning. There is a place for e-learning platforms, but some organizations were over-reliant on that. Others were over-reliant on unconscious bias training. Again, very standalone. What we're seeing is that actually there is more of a modular approach emerging, as well as a focused approach. So what leaders might need to understand about their role could be different to people managers, to team members, to people who are delivering against some of the programs. So we're seeing a real move to more specific training that's given to people throughout the organization. The other thing, and Susanne mentioned it as well, there's more specific training happening as well. So psychological safety has emerged as a trend, as well as inclusive language. How do we ensure that we're really pulling everybody into our comms? And also there is that sense of well-being. It's a big trend throughout this. So just a reminder, the light blue circles here are those organizations that were starting out last year. And what we're trying to see with the dark blue is how that has changed this year. So we can see that last year we didn't have a leading organization. We only had one organization that was advancing last year. So it's great to see that we have more doing that this year. So in terms of our now, next, and later for principle 2, there is no two ways about it. Right now, we do see that people, that equipping leaders and managers to create those conditions is absolutely crucial. And in terms of what to do next, something we'd like to see more of is the monitoring of the uptake and the impact of those learning and development options. I tell you what, member companies are investing a lot in this. And so make sure that you're capturing whether or not they've been effective. And we're seeing it only from a couple, but it's very effective in terms of what to do later. The more you integrate behavioral expectations into your career development frameworks, the more that that is embedded. So principle 3. Okay, principle 3 is about organizational culture. And there is no doubt that the performance against this one is trickier. And we think it's because if you are trying to change your culture, it takes time. And it's also more difficult to measure what that progress might look like. But commitment remains. And what we're seeing from member companies is that they're really playing the long-term game. They know that this is going to take time. What's interesting in terms of that inclusive culture, we're really seeing more member companies engaging with their colleagues, with people, whether that's through network groups, whether or not that's through focus group discussions. There's a lot of listening going on, which is really great. There's some terrific examples of where actually one program has been completely reshaped on the back of the feedback, and they've renamed their DEI program. It's really exciting to read that, actually. And of course, you generate the buy-in right from the get-go because you're asking people, how do we make this real to you? Where we are seeing some stronger, more confident performance actually is around policies and processes, with a particular emphasis on recruitment. Member companies are really experimenting actually with diverse panels, shortlists, blind CVs. There's a whole raft of new tactics that companies are really experimenting with to diversify and ensure that they've got an inclusive recruitment process. We've gone to detail. There's some very detailed examples within the report. So if that's something you're thinking about doing, don't reinvent the wheel. Go and have a look and see what others are doing. Overall, what was really great to see here is that sense of building on what you already have. So ensuring that if you've got a particular policy, you look at that again through an inclusion lens to make sure that everyone has access and everyone is using it. So in terms of our now, next and later for this one, as I've just said, you don't need to start from scratch. Rather than introduce a whole range of new policies, review the ones that you've actually got and monitor the uptake. In terms of next, anything that's personalized, we know people are listening to, we know that is a tall order. But the more personalized the communications, the events, the more effective they can be. And what we would say, and we said this last year too, the events that people are organizing are absolutely terrific. The awareness raising, it's great. But there needs to be followed up by a culture of adherence and promotion to ensure that it's embedded, so that you really gain from that really great project that you've done. Make sure that you regularly monitor it. We're on to another strong principle. This is around data. This is what our organizations do to capture relevant data, develop those insights, and evolve strategic objectives. This is strong. This is a strong one. And we're seeing organizations move beyond the classic gender, age, nationality data points to others, such as ethnicity, such as disability. The other thing we're seeing is that when we started this 3 years ago, engagement surveys were not necessarily commonplace. They are now. It is unusual to come across an organization that aren't using them in some format. And what we're seeing is the continued expansion to seafarers. And very excitingly, the other thing we're seeing is that there is more being made of it. So, and this is twofold. One is that organizations are really spending time to encourage people to share their data. So you have really specific sharing data campaigns that are led throughout the organization. There's a regionalized approach for global firms to make sure that people everywhere see the necessity of it. But what was really exciting this year is that there were more tangible examples of how all the data is being used to make informed decisions. Whether or not with one firm, they could see through their data that they needed to do more on their recruitment process. So that's where they focused. Others, it was around seafaring. They'd done some great stuff on shore. So let's now make sure that we're capturing that and we're doing that on board our vessels. So we were seeing some really specific examples, which is terrific, because of course, we're collecting the data to do something with it. It's not a means in itself. So we would encourage firms to continue doing that. And that is, if we look at our now, next, and later for data, that's exactly what we say. Use what you already are doing and expand it, and use it to set those performance indicators, whatever that might look like to you, so that you can monitor progress. And with those engagement surveys, and in the report, we put examples. Some people have been extremely generous in sharing what they're doing. And there's some great examples of inclusion questions that you can put into your engagement survey. And look at those through the different groups, different lenses, so you can check to see whether everybody is feeling great about working in your organization. And then in terms of later, what we want to see happening, and we've seen it in a couple of organizations, you combine the demographic data with your sentiment data, so you get a full picture of what is going on in your organization, and you can look at that across the whole employee life cycle. Our final principle is comms, communications. This is a trickier one, and no doubt the background, the context in which organizations are doing this work are the reasons why this is more challenging. And as I mentioned in those two questions at the end, we say, what makes you proud and what are you finding a challenge? And communicating with a variety of stakeholders is something that organizations are having to think very carefully about. So it's unsurprising that what we're finding is that there is more of a confidence when communicating internally than externally. Having said that, there are examples of member companies who, and I see it, they are being more confident in what they are saying externally. So a great example of this is last year, what I found is that we would look, when people say, oh, yeah, this is what we say in our ESG report, well, then we would go and we would look through this 100-page document to find this wonderful narrative about what they're doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I'm seeing this year is that some of those, they're pulling them out and they are putting those on their career websites or somewhere in their main website where it's easier to see what the story is. So firms are still communicating and communicating confidently, even against that backdrop. But we know that it makes things more complex. We understand that. And the one other thing around this principle, which was really interesting to see, organizations are beginning to understand that who communicates is just as important as the message. And so with some organizations, they have a more strategic approach. Well, this message is going to come from our leader, but this message is more effective if it comes from the line manager or a peer. So there is a more differentiated approach to how organizations are communicating what they are doing. So there are our 5 principles. I just want to make some closing remarks and some top level comments. What I would say is that the hard work is paying off. We know this takes a concerted effort over time. And it's lovely to see that last year, when we looked at our maturity framework, we could identify that there were some organizations who were pivoting. They were on the cusp of moving from starting out to developing or advancing to leading. And this year we could really see that they'd made that jump. And that consistent effort is how you do it. So that was really good to see. The other thing is we heard last year, people really do like those case studies and the examples. So we have included more detail this year. So please do use it. And yeah, as I said, member companies have been so generous in sharing what they are doing. But I'm going to echo Susanne here. A big thank you to all of our member companies. We read those submissions from start to finish. We can see the effort that you are putting in. Thank you so much, because I think I speak for all our readers. It's really valuable and it's really making a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and thank you for the collaboration again this year. It's been a close collaboration for 3 years in a row, where DSG is hard at work at analyzing all of the amazing submissions that we receive every year. So thank you to Jenny and obviously to DSG for putting in the work together with especially Christian on our side. And we are very proud to, again this year, be able to push out a very elaborate insights report that we hope that you will enjoy reading, and more importantly, that you'll be able to apply and use in your day-to-day work. Let me sort of share a general sort of excitement that we're seeing that even in an increasingly global, complex global context, the commitment stays strong, which is a very positive thing, and it really reflects the courage of those that continue to move forward and strengthen their approach to DEI with even a renewed focus and intent. And some of our ambassadors on this are exactly who I'd like to invite to join me for a panel conversation now. We have Heidi Heseltine, who has been obviously working closely also with Christian and Jenny to produce the report this year. She's the founder and Chief Executive Officer for Diversity Study Group, who is also a founding partner, a founding knowledge partner of the Orbital Alliance. I'm also very pleased to welcome Meei Wong, who is one of our 2 co-chairs for the Orbital Alliance and also a Chief Executive Officer with Circle Digital Ventures. Welcome to you, Meei. And finally to Mikael Skov, who is our other co-chair of the Orbital Alliance, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Hafnia as well. And Mikael has been co-chair for the Alliance since the launch in 2022, where Meei joined us about a year ago. But we're very pleased to be working with all 3 of you in driving progress across the Alliance. For this conversation here, what we are looking to explore is how we can stay committed and keep leading sort of on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And welcome to all of you. And let me first hand over or first ask the first question to Meei, who, as you can see, is very strong in transparency. We are exploring what it is, but we can hear what you're saying. So it's all good, Meei. But keen to hear your thoughts as to why do we need a report like this? Why is this work important in your view?
Thank you, Susanne. Hello, everyone. Sorry about the video. I am extremely transparent, and that is, well, aligned with the theme that we are talking about today. I think this work is important to me because it showcases what best practices look like across the industry. I think there's 3 main reasons why I think this work is important. The first reason, it helps us map the journey together. The maturity scale set out in the report gives us the simple way of knowing how to map and how to measure where each company is on this journey. Companies are on different stages, and that's perfectly fine. It's not about seeing who is ahead, who is behind, who is faster, who is slower. It gives us a common language to talk about progress, see where we stand today together collectively and know how to move forward together. The second reason is this gives us the ability to learn from each other, keeping each other accountable. The examples under each of the 5 principles are very valuable because they let us learn from each other. At the heart of it, this is about transparency, the willingness to share data and experience and keeping each other accountable. And the third one, and perhaps the most important one for me, is that this helps set a solid foundation. We now have a lot of collective data and information that can serve as a benchmark for the industry. And with that, I hope this work sets a foundation, not just for All Board Alliance, but for the industry as a whole. I also hope that this encourages companies of different sizes, no matter how big they are, how small they are, what role they play within shipping, as we know this is a very global business, and where they are in the map, both in terms of locations and the journey to move with the standard and to move with us and be part of the shift in the industry, and that hopefully one day other industry can look at us and say, let's use shipping as a benchmark.
Thank you so much, Meei. That makes a lot of sense and a strong argument as to why transparency is so important and can help us sort of drive a path forward. Before I have the next question for Mikael, I just want to encourage everyone. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions, please share them in the chat or in the Q&A function, and we'll make sure to see how many we can answer at the end. But we've set aside time, so please put your questions in there. So my next question, Mikael, is for you. We are seeing a backlash right now against diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout. Why do we need to keep going in your perspective?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good question, and I think you kind of, or Jenny alluded to it a little bit in the beginning, right? And I think at least the way that we look at it is that as a business leader, or anyone really that has any element of responsibility around a business, I think it's our prime task to make sure that you have access to as many talented people that are around. So basically, like, you should have the strongest focus of making your workplace attractive to as many people as possible that would like to work with you, because that will definitely heighten the quality of your decision making. If you then on top of that add the whole diversity aspect, right? And I think, I'm probably a very good example, belonging to a generation that's kind of gone through, a few of these periods, and even I can say that, it never ceases to surprise me when you do different tests about certain dilemmas and how you're going to solve them. And you bring teams together and you split them up, you make them diverse, non-diverse. It is every single time that diverse teams have different angles, different solutions, often better solutions than mono teams. So, for me, it's a business rationale. I actually don't understand the people that are saying, that they are against this, because for me, it's like, well, why would you be against creating a workplace or an industry that everybody would like to work in? I mean, that should be your prime example. So, I think that's the business critical part, right? And I do think with the whole backlash, I would actually spinning a little bit positively. It's a little bit like the decarbonization that we've been through. I think at some point there's always an element of fatigue if you're driving an agenda that is not supported by data or business results. And I think it has to do with everyone being busy, everyone having a work to do, and quite often I think not everyone catches on to the overall thesis until they see business results. So I very much agree with what Jenny said in the beginning, that now we are getting to a point where more data will show us that actually this makes sense. And I think this is for us the reason why we support this. And quite frankly, I think the backlash will probably reveal that a lot of people that were on this side of it just did it for compliance. And therefore they now see this as an excuse to leave and not focus on it anymore. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe what we're getting out of this is that we're going to have a more focused, serious side of the table that actually wants to drive this forward because we believe in it and we believe that it makes our businesses better. So I'm not so concerned about the backlash, because quite frankly, the backlash is all about emotions. And, just because you're loud and you repeat the same thing every time doesn't make it more correct, in my view. I haven't heard any argument so far that has even remotely persuaded me that focusing on DEI in general is not good for the business. All I've heard is people that don't like certain areas or quotas, but in theory, I haven't heard anything that changes our mind. And I think it's super important now that we stick on this path that we're on now, and it's great to see this progress that we're making collectively, because the people that are involved in this are involved because they actually believe in it and can see results in it, right? And I think those are the ones we'd like to have on this journey.
Thank you very much, Mikael. And it's a pleasure to have someone who's such a strong ambassador, and it's great, even more great to see that it's not just about believing, it's very much also about seeing the results of the work that you put in at Hafnia, and also now seeing the work that is being put in across the alliance. Let me pose you a question, Heidi. What struck you the most when reading through all of the many submissions and working with Jenny on the analysis? What stuck out? What struck you the most this year?
There were a few things. I think, first of all, it was the quality of the submissions. We had some really wonderful submissions where, as Jenny's already said, it was really obvious that organisations have taken a lot of time and trouble with the submissions that they've put forward. But in terms of the content of the submissions, it goes to the point that Mikael just raised. I think more around DEI aims being linked to business strategies. Basically it's an enabler for competitive advantage. So absolutely, it makes good business sense. It's practical, it's relevant, it's delivering those tangible results. So seeing that and the industry really starting to embrace it more was one of them. I think whilst it was one of the weaker principles, principle 3 around organisational culture, the focus on inclusion for me is another area that really stood out, because again, this is where organisations stand to make really significant gains if they do this and do it well, and do it across the business and the employee life cycle. And again, it's about good business sense, but it's also around fairness for everyone and providing everyone with the opportunities to make progress. So that was wonderful to see that starting to emerge even more. And I think the final one for me, the final thing that stood out for me was the development of the communication strategies. We acknowledge this is quite challenging, particularly at the moment. There's so many different competing priorities. You've obviously got in certain parts of the world, the perceived backlash around DEI. There's also so many other things going on in the day-to-day business that we operate in the maritime sector, that actually really nailing the who, the what and the why is so important in terms of actually people understanding what it is that we're trying to do and why we're doing it and the benefits that it brings. So seeing those comm strategies emerging is really encouraging.
Thank you, Heidi. And so a lot of new learnings and insights, but obviously we're still facing challenges despite the commitment that we are seeing. So I have a question for all of you, and jump in whomever would like to answer first. But what are the biggest challenges to come as you see them when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion across the industry? Who wants to? Mikael, you want to go first?
Yeah, exactly. I can have a go at that. I mean, I think probably two elements that I would focus on. I think the biggest challenge is this fatigue thing. That basically we hit a situation where we're not producing sufficient progress on results that kind of in a way supports the path that we're on. I think this is probably a classic thing, right? That the good intentions are kind of not being followed up by constant improvement on data and the link to business results. I do think that that will just be an ongoing challenge. It's not something that I'm necessarily concerned about, because I know that we can do that, but I also have to appreciate that in a busy world for a lot of people, as I said earlier, there are a lot of things to do. You have to keep this moving, right? You can't really stand still. You have to keep on showing progress. So I think that will be a kind of a constant challenge for sure.
Good point. Sort of with fatigue, obviously one of the topics that we'll also be addressing more in the alliance going forward for exactly that reason. Heidi, Meei, you want to jump in with what you see as some of the bigger challenges going forward?
I can jump into this one. I agree with Mikael. I think keeping the momentum up is the most difficult thing. I think that's number one. And the fatigue is definitely there. The second thing would be, how do we make sure that, shipping is a global business. Different parts of the world have very different adoption pace for something like this, DEI. And how do we make sure that nobody is left behind? I think that is a really difficult thing to make sure that everybody do move together as an industry. And we're not creating a gap that is so big that the East and the West are operating completely on a different scale altogether.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you for that. Heidi, you want to jump in? You mentioned a bit challenges already, but would you have anything further to add?
Yeah, I mean, wholeheartedly echo the maintaining momentum. But I think the other thing for me is if you think back to when we started and how this has evolved over years, we wanted to move from intent to action, and we're seeing that. It's absolutely wonderful. But actually also, and this isn't for everyone, but I think for the industry as a whole, it's moving from action to accountability. And I think that is a really big challenge, because it's actually, that's where you stand and fall by the standards you're setting, by actually really kind of putting your stake in the ground and saying, this is what we stand for. And if you're going to work for us, if you're going to be in this organization, this is what we expect. And so I think that shift into the accountability, and there are organizations doing it and they're doing a fantastic job, not everyone, and that's fine. It might not have been the appropriate time yet, but that I think is going to be one of the challenges, one that can be overcome, but certainly one that I'm interested in seeing more of that coming through.
Thank you. And then the final question for the panel before we head into the Q&A session. There are a lot of things when reading through the report. We've had the advantage of going obviously through it before everyone else. But what are you seeing that you're most proud of? And jump in as whoever wants to go first on this one.
Shall I start? I'm very proud of the amount of information data we have received from the members company. And members company are really turning, taking actions on what they believe. I think that is something that I think is very, very, solid. It is setting a very solid foundation for us to work on. I'm really proud that we have very supportive members.
Thank you, Meei. Heidi, you want to go next?
Yeah, and I think for me, again, it's looking back since we started. I think I'm really proud of how organisations are showcasing their commitment to the people who work for them, to the people and culture. It's not to say that there wasn't a commitment before, but it's becoming really clearly defined. And we had conversations, we still have these conversations sometimes around perhaps a lack of transparency in maritime. We've all been rather secretive historically. And to see those walls coming down and people saying, actually, this is what we're doing, it's working really well, but this is also where we're having some problems. But having that open dialogue so that we can all learn and progress, I think for me is something I'm super, super proud of. And the deepening understanding of how this all adds value so that it isn't something that's you can pick up or put down. I think the point that Mikael was saying, this is something you've got to commit to, maintain the momentum, but then you do as a business reap the rewards. So it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, thank you very much. And with transparency, obviously also comes mutual accountability, and that's how, as an alliance, we can help each other out in constantly driving that accountability forward. Mikael,
Yeah.
what are you proudest of?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm also proud of everything else that the others said. So I think, maybe just building a little bit on on what Heidi mentioned. I mean, I think the fact that we put this high on the agenda in general terms, like it's something you can actually talk about. I think I mean, at least my impression is when I meet people around, that the level of understanding is slowly but surely increasing. And I'm not just talking about the members, also in general. And, I mean, I've said this before, it's not all positive, right? And there's also a lot of people that come, kind of forward and say, why are you doing this? Why are you getting involved in it? But, I kind of enjoy these conversations as well, because I think whoever kind of brings up the topic gives you a chance of explaining, okay, well, thank you for bringing it up, although you're not being particularly friendly, but, it gives you an opportunity to kind of explain. So I kind of like this, seeing the circle expanding and seeing that we've created some kind of curiosity and interest. There's still some people that, will take a bit more time, but I think in general it's nice to see that people take it serious now and actually even want to debate it. So I think that's been a good experience.
Thank you, Mikael, and thank you to everyone. And now, sort of, we'll be asking Christian to see what questions may have come in. Do you want to share a first question, Christian?
Yes, we have a few questions that came in. First and foremost, we get a lot of kudos. So kudos to the team on this report and the outcome. It's good reactions on it so far, so that's lovely. Just turn on so I'm not just a dark screen. Apologies for that. The first question is in how we report on also seafarers in the report. And the question reads, do members who employ seafarers, whether directly or via outsourcing, report progress separately for their respective seafarer pools, or is it consolidated and reported at the company level? It would be valuable to hear company stories, progress and challenges with the office and seagoing teams.
So thank you, Christian. So first of all, we'll be pushing out a new report next year where we'll also be tracking sort of more focused on seafaring, on the sustainable crewing guidelines progress report. But on this one, maybe can I hand this question to you, Heidi? Would you be able to say a bit about how that split has sort of come out in the report?
Yeah, it's largely down to member organisations themselves deciding on how they complete the submission report. So we ask for progress against each of the principles. What we love is where organisations have seafarers as well as shore. Obviously, we love to get updates on both, and that's what we encourage. But what we see within the data that we're provided and within the content of the submission forms is that, yes, the seafarers, they can report on that separately in terms of the initiatives that are being done. And as Jenny said before, whether it's KPIs, ambitions, where organisations want to go and the progress that they're making.
Thank you, Heidi. Anyone else want to jump in, or maybe we should go to the next question, Christian?
Yeah.
I like to say that, Christian.
Christian. We have another good one here on whether we think labor shortages has an impact on how companies are holding leaders and employees accountable for discrimination or bullying and harassment.
Who wants to jump in on that one?
I mean, I can add a little bit to this. No, I think it's an extremely good question, and I think, at least as far as we're concerned, it's kind of happening on more than one front. One is obviously to have zero tolerance on these things, right? And I think that in itself, I would assume is a given for most. But I think the way we try to tackle it afterwards is that we've launched quite a lot of leadership education, because what goes along with all these things is that you have people that are actually able to fulfill a leadership role. And part of a leadership role in many companies and also in Hafnia is, of course, that you follow up on the policies and you address them and you make sure that you are observant and you report things in. And the third part is probably the ability anonymously to actually report in and feel safe and secure that you can actually report things when they're happening without having the fear of harassment. So in other words, that things go, on a separate communication channel outside, you know, if you cut the small system on board a ship, that sometimes can be a bit intimidating because, you know, you're obviously far away, you know, with a small group of people. So the combination of those three, I think for us has been working quite well. And I would not underestimate the additional work that goes into the leadership training, not just for people onshore, but also for people at sea. I think for us, that has been a great achievement to see how the leadership training has lifted the focus on these things.
Thank you very much, Mikael. And anyone else want to jump in on this one? If not, do we have another question? Question.
Yes, we do. One question is on whether there is a checkpoint with seafarers on their felt experiences versus where are we on the journey right now?
Maybe that one is for you, Heidi. I guess it's in reference to the maturity framework.
I think so. It might fall more into diversity at sea in terms of the overall alliance, I guess, but in terms of specifically for the report, no, there's not a specific checkpoint within the report around this. Again, it comes down to the members, the submissions, and what you're doing as members and how you're reporting that in. So yes, there can be, with some of the work that we're seeing, absolutely, there will be check-ins on the felt and the lived experience. But that's down to the individual member organisations around that. But I think with the diversity at sea, there's probably been more checkpoints along the way, hasn't there, Susanne?
Oh yes, a lot of data on that, and we'll definitely see more on that next year. But it has been very encouraging to see that there are, in general, more and more data from seafarers being included in the submissions overall, which is very positive because that helps us better understand what the challenges are, and more importantly, what the best practices are. So thank you for that, Heidi. Christian, any more?
We have a lot of questions on seafarers. Let me just see where it starts. Are there any insights into the report looking at the early pipeline stage of cadets and the challenges they are facing as they come into the industry, given their fresh perspectives? I think it speaks sort of to what you just mentioned, Heidi, that it's not specifically addressed in the report, but it comes as an accumulated submissions. Still a good question, though, and something that worth reporting on in the future, perhaps. Oh, they're popping in now, sorry. Are we seeing stronger linkage between inclusion / psychological safety and generative safety culture?
I'd say yes. I'm happy to start that one. I think Mikael and Meei can certainly add to it. Absolutely. You know, I think when we're looking at inclusion, it's around that experience for everyone. Ashore, at sea, it applies across both. And so we're seeing more work being done on it. Yes, absolutely. We're seeing more links emerging. Yes, we need more in terms of data, I think, to really define that. To make more of the case for it. But in terms of what member organisations are doing and the role it's playing within initiatives of companies, absolutely, it's most certainly on the increase. I think, Meei, Mikael, I'm sure you can add to that.
Yeah, I would definitely second that also, and that's kind of also where we see it. I mean, we have now a number of ships where we've been experimenting a little bit with having, you know, 50-50 on the diversity side, men and women, and inclusion in general. It's one of these areas where I really have, you know, strong expectations that we will see data supporting the fact that you improve on the working environment in general, and thereby you improve on the safety statistics. And you know, I think it's one of these important areas. So I would say with the small data we have now, it's also our impression that what you mentioned, Heidi, that is what we're beginning to see.
I don't have much to add to that. I second, you know, what Mikael and Heidi say. That's definitely a very important part.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we may have time for one final question, if there is one, Christian. Or did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is one here on what's an objective way on how we can examine the data on seafarers' welfare or DI level beyond gender-specific crew retention rate. Again, we're back on the crews.
Heidi, thank you for volunteering on that one.
It will depend on the data that you're gathering. So what we tend to see, and this, when we're looking at, if you like, best practice, it's around having the qualitative and the quantitative data, understanding the experiences, and actually also how you can apply different lenses to that data to understand what's working well and what's not working as well. We've seen some wonderful, I think it was Jenny was saying earlier, when we look at how organizations are bringing different initiatives into play, that data can then point towards more action. It might be that there's focus groups that take place to help understand what needs to be done to improve welfare. It might mean that it's around policies need to change, but it might also mean that actually practices need to change. And it doesn't always relate specifically, or only, should I say, to the crew on board. There's the shore interaction, the seafaring interaction, it's all in play here. But actually, so yes, there isn't a simple answer to that question, because it does depend around the data you're gathering and what it consists of. What I would say is that there are fantastic ways you can be very objective about it, and it's how you essentially dissect the data and take the action.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And I think we are at the point where that I want to say thank you so much to Heidi, Meei, and Mikael for joining this panel. And then at the end, I just want to advertise a few upcoming events. So as many of you will probably already know, we are in the process of developing a new all aboard lines strategy. We're at the end of our first 3-year strategy periods, and at the summit in October, the Global Maritime Forum annual summit, we will be releasing that strategy, and also want to host a webinar on the 5th of November. So please mark that out and save the date. And then I also briefly wanted to advertise our upcoming virtual learning session series on the Sustainable Crewing Guidelines. So this is for all companies and leaders interested in exploring how to implement the Sustainable Crewing Guidelines. So everyone there is about learning from each other and finding ways to share insights. And if you would like to join, please sign up via email with our colleague Harper, and you can see the email there. We'll also share that with you afterwards. And nothing further from me apart from thank you to everyone involved in making this report come out today. We are really happy to see so many of you, and thank you to everyone for the progress achieved. We've done this together. Thank you.